Okay. Great, great, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight, you all, on another segment of relationship advice for women. This one is called The Other Woman. Today, we have Harris Eddie Hill, who will be sharing their personal testimony with us. So, we're going to start with a few questions, just learning about your identity, and then it's going to seamlessly transition into your story about the other woman. So let's start with the first question. It's about your non-binary identity. Um,
Yeah.
and so, can you start by sharing what it means to you personally to identify as non-binary, and how did you come to understand and embrace your non-binary identity?
Yeah, sure. I always felt like I wasn't girl or boy, but I was like, I think that's just a flaw of mine personally. Like eventually it will feel right, and it just never did. Um I remember when I was in nursery school, I think you guys call it like preschool or something. And they would ask the girls to line up and the boys to line up, and I had to really think about which line I was supposed to be in.
Mhm.
And so it was never natural.
Mhm.
And it was really this feeling that like girl and boy were foreign concepts. And not
Mhm.
only foreign concepts, but also when people applied them to me, it felt really kind of gross and weird. And when I was 26, which was longer ago than you might think, I came across this whole list of different words about different genders besides the traditional. And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. Um, and it was really liberating and like a really positive thing. So, yeah, non binary is like an umbrella term for anyone who doesn't really fit into man or woman completely or at all. And I definitely feel generally that gender is a strange concept. I don't like my friend. I've got loads of friends who are men or women, and they talk about being men or women, which is totally cool. But I don't get it. I don't know what it is to feel what they feel and to say it so comfortably and sometimes passionately. I think it's awesome, but I don't get it. So yeah.
Okay, so when you say you didn't feel like either or, how does either or supposed to feel?
I guess like comfortable or natural, I suppose. Like, I remember I was at a writing group that I've belonged to for like 8 years, and I was talking with my female friends in that group at one point. We just kind of split off and were chatting, and we were talking about this, and I said, when people, my female friends are like, "Yeah, I'm a woman, and I feel really comfortable with that, and it means a lot to me, and um, I can say it, and it feels true, and it feels good, it feels positive." Um, I just found that like amazing.
Mhm.
One of the friends was like, "Oh, I don't feel that way at all. I just say I'm a woman because I was assigned female at birth."
Mhm.
And we all sort of looked at her and she's like, "Huh, I wonder if I'm non-binary." And since then, she's sort of thought about it and been like, "Yeah, maybe I am, but I just don't know if I care enough to say it." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
That's interesting because even when you say, do you feel like a woman? I remember this guy I was dating a while ago. I believe I was maybe 17, 18 or something. He was older than I was. And he asked me if I felt like a woman. And I said no. Like, I felt like a girl. And he didn't like that. And so I guess people's definition of feeling like a woman could be different. Because when he asked me that, I thought he was talking about an adult, an adult, and I didn't feel like an adult. That's kind of, and I can understand why he didn't like that. And so, um, I wanted to ask, like, when you say you don't feel like either or, is it because you don't feel feminine or masculine?
No, I think in terms of energy, of like femininity and masculinity, I feel very strongly both.
Okay.
So in terms of the actual energy and like my behavior and how I talk to people and how I like feel most comfortable. Like the energy side of it, I feel very strongly both, like 100% both.
100%. So yeah, I mean, I definitely have some, I would say, masculine traits. But I just kind of, I still feel like when you say non-binary, does that mean you don't know what you are?
No, I feel very strong. Like specifically, it's an umbrella term, so it covers lots of other things. It's like a catch-all term, and specifically under that, I feel genderless. So when I'm not seen, by my friends and people that know me, as they see me as like a genderless person, and they know that that's not really me, I feel seen, and I feel that that's right. But when people assume that I'm one thing or another, I'm not offended. But it just feels odd. It feels really, it's like, like if you've got a neighbor that you don't speak to very much and they're convinced that your name is like Gertrude or something, and that's not your name. And when they're like, "Hey Gertrude," you're like, "Oh," there's no malintent, but it just feels, it's just wrong.
So I got you. So we're going to move to the next question and hopefully unwrap some of these questions that I have. So what were some of the early challenges that you faced in navigating society's expectations of gender? And did you feel pressure to conform? And how did that affect your sense of self-worth?
Yeah, I think I became aware at a really young age that to be a girl or a woman, there were so many expectations. There's the expectation to be desirable and to, that your value is tied up in how attractive you are. And, growing up, I'm from a very tall family, and growing up I was very tall and there wasn't really an ounce of fat on me. So I didn't have like a particularly prominent chest, and I was bullied for that a lot. So I felt like my earlier life was taken up a lot with trying to conform so that I wasn't bullied. I still had to deal with a lot of sexism. I don't now as much, because I think people are sometimes confused when they look at me.
When they look at you, you reveal who you are, because I wouldn't have known if you wouldn't have said anything to me.
Yeah, well, if I'm in like a public restroom, like washing my hands, occasionally I have someone come in and be like looking at the back at the door to make sure that they're in the right one.
So which restroom do?
I still use the female one just because that's what I'm used to, and like to go in the male one just seems pointless because that would also be wrong. So I'm like, oh, I just can't be bothered. But I was at the pub with a friend on Friday, and these sort of very merry, slightly drunk people sat with us. I'm not really a drinker, and my friend isn't a particularly big drinker either. And this man and woman sat with us. Both of them had quite a lot, and she had assumed I was a woman and he had assumed I was a man.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, that was really funny. And my friend said, I like it when they sort of cancel each other out.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But yeah, I think it's really hard. I think I'm really familiar with what it is to be perceived as a woman, at least, and all the pressures and all the comments that people feel they can make about you. And if you don't conform in any way, it makes them uncomfortable. If you don't want to get married, or you don't want to have children, or you really enjoy your career and that's what it's about for you, and you like going on vacation, and if you don't like the things that people want you to like, you get a lot of resistance. And so since I came,
with male, female, male, it, they, whatever, that's with everybody.
Yeah, but I think those rules are harder for women. I think that if if a guy's like, oh, I just love working and dating and like having fun with my friends, there's no one like, oh, well, what if your sperm start not working, or what if you're going to be past your best and then no one's going to want you. No one says that.
Right. No one says that to me. You're right. You're absolutely right. And so how did when did you find this out? Like, when did you Like, when did you say, okay, this is who I am and I'm going to accept that?
Yeah, I realized when I was 26, so it was just over 10 years ago.
Okay, 26. Okay. And then how did that affect your sense of self?
It was really positive. Like it emotionally, it felt positive, but mentally, it was quite challenging because obviously I've grown up with the same stuff that everyone else has grown up with, and I was like, well, how does that work? What does this mean? And there was still a part of me that was critical and not quite convinced. So it took a little while of working it out, and it was a long journey. I thought, when I was younger, I realized that when I date people, I don't really care about their gender. It's just not important to me. The same way that their eye color or what they look like, it's just not important. It's all about the person and if they have a good heart. And I was never bothered. So it just seemed like an aesthetic thing. I didn't really understand. So I thought that when I started coming out about my gender, that it would just be the same as before. I would just tell people once and they'd be like, oh, okay. But no, it took years. There's, one particular family member I'm still working on like 10 years later who...
What part are you working on? Because what do they call you? Your birth name?
No, luckily no one does that anymore, but it's taken a lot of fighting. And I don't mean fighting literally, but advocating for myself. And, there's been so many occasions when my birth name was used and I had to be like, there's no one here of that name. My name is Harris. So if you're talking about me, that's the name you would use, So it's not argumentative, but I have to be assertive over and over again. And it's a little bit, that can be tough sometimes.
Okay. And I've got a question because your name is Harris. You use, well, most people would call it a male name. What made you choose that versus a female name?
I think because of how I look and how most of the time people would read me as female. So at the moment anyway. So I felt like, I'm comfortable with that name. That used to be my nickname when I played like rugby and when I boxed and stuff when I was younger. That's just what I was called already. So I felt like it balanced me out. And I definitely, like how I dress and I do my hair is probably more masculine than not. And I don't know, it just felt right. I think a lot of this stuff comes down to feeling right rather than logic.
Okay, I got you. And so, like, for instance, when we first started, I don't even know if this was on the broadcast, but I told you that, my name is Jonna, but, Facebook is Grace, but you can call me either or. So, like, with me, it doesn't matter if someone calls me Jonna or Grace. So why does it matter to you if someone calls you by your birth name or your other name?
I think it's not the same for every person in my position, but for a lot of us, it's this feeling that you got put in the wrong place, the wrong, and it's somewhere you were stuck for years to begin with. And it takes so much energy and bravery, courage, and, kind of growing a thick skin because so many people have such awful things to say to you. And I think it took so much to get out of that box. And this might sound dramatic, and I don't mean it 100%, but it's kind of in the same ballpark as almost like growing up in some kind of mental prison. So that old name represents a place that I was stuck in for a long time and unhappy for a long time.
Okay.
Maybe if you were married to an abusive partner for a long time and you finally divorced and you left them and you finally found happiness and you finally escaped and someone kept calling you Mr. or Mrs. and the last name of your ex, there's something about it that's kind of, quite tough for me.
That's interesting. When I changed my life, that's when, or my life changed. I took Grace. That was the name I took, Grace. So I definitely understand the name change part. So Yeah. So in a world where there is so much, so much is defined by male and female labels, how do you navigate relationships and interactions while asserting your non-binary identity?
I think if I'm in a social situation with people that I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like an okay moment to say it, and people feel relaxed
Mm-hmm.
and they make an assumption, then I might just let them know.
Mm-hmm. Like that example you gave us about Friday.
Yeah. And I might, so we were all having a laugh, everyone was merry, everyone had I only had one drink for the record, but the others had clearly had a few more than that. And the woman next to me called me a she, the guy opposite me called me a he, and they both looked at me and I was like, well, I'm actually a they them, so nobody's right. And then we just sort of laughed about it.
Okay.
But had it not felt like we could have a laugh, I probably would have just sucked it up and just not said anything. But in terms of my like close personal relationships, if people don't see me, don't want to see me, don't get it, don't like it, then that's just, that's a relationship that's probably not going to survive, because I'm just going to carry on being myself. And I don't really have time to I'm not interested in convincing anyone. I think being in your 30s, you start to give less of a crap, and you have less energy to kind of be people pleasing or that kind of stuff. So the people who want to know me deeply will see me anyway. They might not see me like the first time that we meet, but within a short amount of time, the people I'm compatible with will get it and see it.
Okay, and then so has your experience as a non-binary person shaped the way you approach relationships, particularly in terms of intimacy and vulnerability?
I think vulnerability is probably to some degree something I've always done, because I just have no filter anyway. Like it's not to say that I'm unkind, but rather if someone asks me a direct question, I give them a direct answer. I don't feel any shame or apprehension about that. So yeah, and I think so vulnerability is something that I think comes fairly easily, and people who are less comfortable with that direct approach are probably not going to enjoy spending time with me. In terms of like dating and relationships particularly, I think it took me a while to dispense with the kind of Disney programming that I had. I was born in the 80s and was so used to watching all the Disney movies where men and women end up together every time.
Right.
And I don't mind about gender in partners, but mostly I'm attracted to people who have a masculine energy, most of the time. And so for a long time, I was like, I found it really difficult to envisage myself with men, even though I still dated men occasionally. I'm not a massive dater, but on the occasions I did, it was most often men. And I think in my head, I found that really hard to kind of overcome the kind of Disney prince and princess programming, and for it to make sense to me. And eventually, I think by the time I started to work out that I'm probably in my energy or my presentation a little bit more masculine, or like how I come across or how I socialize or how I speak, I started to think of myself hypothetically as more like a masculine person who is into masculine people. So once I worked that part out, that it was a kind of mask for mask situation, that made more sense.
What makes you feel masculine?
I don't know, it's so complicated, it's so multi-layered, but I think how I prefer to dress, like how I prefer to like wear my hair, and I think I'm listening to a really good book at the moment called What About Men, and it's a feminist talking about men's issues, and it's done really well. And she talks a lot about the sort of cultural influences that boys go through from a very young age, especially in this country. And there's a lot around banter and being cheeky, being a bit childish, and a lot of the stuff that she describes as being typical of boys from a young age was typical of me, but not all the time. But I definitely feel, especially in my friendships, like pretty much just about every single one of my close friends is a woman. And so often in the way that we talk about things, I tend to bring in masculine kind of thinking about it sometimes, and different structures and to be direct and to, yeah, I think it's just a way that I speak, and the things that I say is probably not typical of women.
Okay, I got you. And so moving to the next question, when you introduce yourself as non-binary, how do people typically react? Well, I know how I react. I didn't know what it was. But do you find that others, especially in relationships, fully understand and respect your identity?
I don't tend to bring up the non-binary stuff until I've started to get a feel for the person, unless I'm at an LGBT event, or which is very rare because I don't leave my house a lot. But yeah, it's not something I tend to lead with. I tend to like feel for, if it's someone I'm never going to see again, or I really don't want to see again, then I'm not going to bother to waste either of our time having that conversation, probably. But normally, by the time I've got a feel for someone, my read is usually correct, and I just sort of let them know. I'm like, oh, by the way, I didn't mention. I think I didn't mention this before, but I'm non-binary. I go by they, them, rather than he or she. Just to let you know, and often people will either be like, oh, okay, thanks for telling me, or they'll be like, oh, just remind me again of the details, and we'll just have a little chat. And it's fairly, I want people like me to become as mundane as everyone else. I don't really enjoy sticking out, but at the same time, if I don't advocate for myself, I feel like I'm betraying myself.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. And so, do people usually respect it when you share with them?
Yes, I think most of the time people, even if they don't get it, they'll try to communicate that they're kind and that they're sympathetic. Even if they have no idea, they'll often say things like, oh wow, like that's a really new concept to me. You'll have to bear with me as I kind of get my head around this. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And on the occasions that people make mistakes, they'll be really apologetic. And I'm like, listen, you making a mistake out of habit is just not a big deal. And it's something I've done to my other non-binary and trans friends as well.
Okay.
It's a human error. The thing that I'm scared about is that one day I'll say it to somebody who I've known all my life, or who I thought was a safe person, and they turn around and reject me or say something really awful. So yes, generally people are really kind and really lovely about it, and if they're not going to be, usually I've sussed that out before I say anything.
Right. And so I just want to make sure you can hear me, right? Okay. So when I was reaching out about the podcast, you thought it was important to mention it to me. And so why did you feel like that was important to mention that to me?
I think because your podcast focuses a lot around women, and I like to be upfront with people that I'm going to work with or spend time with or collaborate in any way.
Okay.
Just so that they have forewarning, so that they're prepared and they can like ask themselves, is this really aligned with what I'm doing? And I think I would be more troubled by someone saying yes when they meant no.
Yes.
than if someone just was really honest and said, oh, it's just not going to be a fit. I can, that's fine.
Okay. No, that was important. I mean, it to me, even starting out, people, I thought this was about the other woman. I think it's important to know who we're talking to, and to understand this perspective, because you're the first non-binary person that I know of, because you said people don't just come out and say it, right, that I've ever been able to speak to, and to get this type of information. It's important. And so we're transitioning into relationships. So the first question is, how does your non-binary identity influence your relationships? Do you feel that there are specific expectations placed on you based on how others perceive your gender, even though you identify as neither male or female?
The short answer is no. I think that sort of coming out as non-binary over 10 years ago, now there's no blueprint. People don't know what to ask me, so I kind of feel like almost like a ninja. Like I can slip through situations, and people are like, I don't really have anything to say to you. I don't have any. The moment that I came out, like people stopped asking me if I wanted to have kids, which is still something. Yeah, I still don't know. I literally had a dream about it last night and was really like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. So, and I've been having some really prophetic dreams recently. So I was like, I hope it's not one. I hope it's not one of those.
Wow, so you're a dreamer.
Yeah, big time.
Have any of your dreams come true?
I don't have prophetic dreams often, but when they happen, they tend, like I had one like 2 weeks ago that my brother got the job that he's interviewed for.
Wow.
So I texted him, I was like, I dreamt you got the job, did you get it? And he's like, oh, I don't know. And then the next week he came home, he's like, yeah, I got it. I was like, yes, my dream was right.
Wow.
So I feel I'm very connected to all that kind of thing. But yeah, I think my expectations have dropped, but to the point that like other people have had a lot less expectations of me. But at the same time, it therefore means that we never discuss anything.
Right.
So it's good. It's really liberating to have less expectations, and it's something I wish everybody could have.
Yeah.
But it also means people stop talking to me about it.
But do you want people to talk to you about it?
Yeah, I think it's strange to kind of go from people being a little bit overly invested in what you're going to do with your life to then go to never being asked. It's almost like you fall off the radar, you become kind of forgotten about. Like my close friends, all of my my best friends that I see and talk to all the time, it's something we talk about. But in terms of anyone else I meet, my sister's got 2 kids, and people are like, oh, are you done with 2, or do you think you want one more? Okay. It's very open. And then with me, people get to me and they're like, what have you been up to this week? I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of depth that's been lost, I feel.
Well, then let me ask. I'm interested to know, do you plan to get married at any point?
I think I would like to, yeah. I think I definitely would like a life partner. In terms of having kids, I still don't know. I really like kids, like my nephew and my niece. I love playing with them. My niece is nearly 5, so she's just started school, and we make jokes all the time and laugh at childish things like bums and like saying naughty words. And yeah, we have a great time, and we it's really lovely, but I just don't know if I would do that full time. But I definitely
full time.
Yeah. I mean, I look at my sister, we've grown up really close, and I look at her and how well she's managing parenthood, And I'm like, this is really intense, man.
It's very intense. Would you want to be with a man or a woman, or it just depends on who you connect with?
I tend to like men the most. But that doesn't mean it will definitely end up that way. It just depends, I guess, who I meet. But I think,
Right.
yeah.
And so, if you were to marry a man, this is just hypothetically, would you consider yourself as non-binary, or would you just consider yourself married?
Both, I guess.
And then what if you realize that you can get pregnant?
Oh, I'm pretty certain that's a possibility.
Right.
But no, I think that would have to be really planned. Otherwise, I definitely would be having panic attacks.
You and a lot of other people. That's funny. So we're gonna move away from the hypotheticals. In terms of romantic or intimate connections, do you feel that your identity as non-binary complicates things, or does it give you more freedom to define relationships on your own terms?
I think it gives me freedom, but not just me, usually my partners as well. In 2022, I had my last relationship, and it felt like he was able to be more himself, and there was less expectations of, like, I didn't look at him and think, you're a man, so you have to do all of these things.
Oh, okay.
It was very much like,
yeah.
you're a person and you're allowed to have things that you like and things that you don't like, and it felt like we both had freedom. There's no blueprint. There's no blueprint for people like me, and by extension, then for a partner, there's no blueprint for them either.
And did you feel like you understood him more a little bit? Did y'all get along more?
Yeah, I think so. I think having done so much kind of self-discovery of my own, I feel comfortable with difficult things. So, you know, there were difficult conversations that we had to have that other people might have just, or an earlier version of me would have been like, I'm out, I'm not doing this. But I felt like I was able to sit in the whole situation long enough to be like, you know, I'm curious about this, like, let's discuss it. And it didn't feel like his shortcomings were a rejection of me. They just felt like his shortcomings, and it felt much calmer. We were able to deal with things that were hard in a way that wasn't like blaming the other. And it was like, you're just a person and I'm just a person, and we're just trying the best that we can to navigate the challenges. And I felt like it was I mean, it didn't work out, obviously, but it was overall a really.
Sorry.
8 months, 8-9 months.
So you said it didn't work out, but what now?
It did work out, but I felt like it was a really conscious, intentional, calm relationship from beginning to end. Okay. Everything was discussed. There was nothing that was too hard to have a conversation about. And I think, yeah, there was no pressure on him to be a certain way other than honest.
Okay. And then, so the last question concerning this topic, when you were involved with the married man, how did your non-binary identity play into the dynamic, and were you perceived as a woman in that relationship?
Yeah, so this happened about 6 years before I realized I was non-binary. So one of the reasons I thought you might enjoy the story was because at the time I counted. So I didn't know at the time, but I think that how I approached it, as it got messy really quick, and I got out really quick, and he was a lot older than me. So I think how I dealt with it, looking back, was probably like quite a masculine thing, like the way that I dealt with it, because he was kind of falling apart and becoming like really emotional really quick. He, you know, there's such a stereotype that some women are crazy, and then what they describe, I'm like, I've seen men do that so many times. And you know, so when we met, I was I was only there for about 5 months, but I was working as an exotic dancer in a club. I was totally sober. I would cycle there in my high-vis jacket and my bicycle helmet. I would do like a 9-hour shift from 9 p.m. till 6 a.m., during which I would have some like pasta in a Tupperware that I would eat at like 2 a.m. to keep my energy up. And then I would cycle home at 6 a.m. And it was a really fun job. And it's so interesting. Talked to so many interesting people. And we met there, and he told me at the time that he still lived with his wife, but they were separated. They wanted to stay together for the children until they were sort of a tiny bit older. And I wasn't looking for a husband at that age. I was 20. So I was like, yeah, sure. And he was like, oh, let's go for a date. The rules then were that, I think, and still now, is that you're not allowed to give out your number because it's seen as like soliciting, like close to sort of prostitution, which is, yeah, through.
Oh, you couldn't give out. You couldn't just give out your number.
No, you're not allowed.
Oh, at the exotic club, you couldn't.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I got you. That makes sense.
Yeah. But I, you know, for me to say, oh, well, I usually go to this pub on this evening with my friends, and for them to be like, oh, that's interesting, I also was planning to go there, then it would be okay.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, so we went on a couple of dates, you know, we went out for some drinks, and it was all very, you know, very, very sort of civilized. And then suddenly he kind of got angry that he had to have dinner with his wife and this other couple that they knew on a night when he had planned to see me. And he said, I'm just going to tell her. And I was like, do you mean that she doesn't know that you're dating? And he was like,
look,
no.
Hold on, because you're moving fast. Because I wanted to just know, did he perceive you as a woman? And
yes.
So apparently he did. Now, since we're moving into this, so like you said, you were involved with a married man who claimed he was separated, and now you're saying this part. How did you feel when you discovered the truth about his marriage? And then did it make you question your relationship? So now kind of go into what you were about to say, but please answer these questions as well.
Sure.
So she didn't know you were married? I mean, she didn't know? Or you didn't?
I don't think, no. It sounded like the whole thing was a secret, and I was like, wait, this doesn't make any sense. And I was like, hang on a minute. You know, I was only 20, but I wasn't stupid. And I said, listen, you go and have this dinner. I'm not about to get involved in any mess. We'll talk about it when you're calm and sensible another day. Like, if I have to see you a day or two later, nobody's gonna die. Just calm down.
Right.
And
why was he angry?
I think he felt that his wife was kind of blocking him from doing the things that he wanted to do, and he felt restricted all over again when he was sort of starting to kind of become happy again. But the way that he said it, I was like, hang on, I thought that this was totally above board. I thought that you guys were all on the same page and this was like fine.
Right.
And now it's starting to sound like that's not the case. So I said, listen, go and have this dinner. It's just a dinner. It's not the end of the world. No one's taking your kidneys, you know, just be cool. And I woke up the following morning to, I think it was about 30 missed calls, about 11 text messages, and like 7 voicemails.
Really?
During which time he was becoming more hysterical, was crying. He started to tell me he loved me and stuff. This is a man I'd met up with a handful of times. It was, you know, we hadn't known each other very long. It was like a month maybe.
Really?
It was very, he was coming on pretty strong, and he was very upset, and he was very passionate, and obviously he was getting more and more drunk as all of the messages came. And I was like, oh no, oh dear, this is a disaster, and this is a mess, and I'm not getting involved.
How were your feelings for him at that time?
I was just kind of getting to know him. Like, it was so early. I was
Okay.
not like oh, this is the man of my dreams, or I didn't know him, you know. We'd been out for
Wow.
drinks a few times, and it was not a big thing, but to him he
Okay.
acted like, you know, we were soon to be married or something. It was crazy.
Okay. Well, how long did your involvement with him last?
I think it was only about 4 weeks or something.
Are
It
you
couldn't have been
serious?
any. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So you didn't stay in this long at all. And so how long did it last after you found out?
I think he drove to see me like 2 days later.
Mhm.
By which time I was totally, you know, like when you're open to somebody, you're like, you know, if they touch your hand or they sort of hug you goodbye, then that feels nice. But the moment that you're like, this is messy, I feel awkward, then anything like
Yeah.
that is like, yeah, I'm not into it. Like, I don't want a hug.
Mhm.
So he drove. The thing is, I was staying in my university like halls, like dorms, I think you guys call it at that point.
Yeah.
So he drove to see me when I was round the corner at my other friend's halls, and we were sat on the grass, drinking tea and smoking cigarettes, and
Mhm.
you know, just hanging out. And I was like, this dude. And he said I was 20. He said he was 38. I look back now, I was like, that dude was not 38. He was definitely older than that.
He's lying. Oh my.
Yeah, big time. And I said, listen, this dude's coming over. Like, he wants to talk things through. I'm going to break it off. So he parked in the car park at my friend's halls, and there was a whole bunch of them on the grass watching this whole thing unfold. I was in his front seat, the engine was off, we were just chatting.
Mhm.
And I was like, listen, it really sounds to me like you need to deal with whatever is going on in your marriage. Like, at first you told me you were separated, and now you're saying you actually are not sure if you're separated. And you know, I think you need to go back to your wife and have a conversation and sort this out, because I'm not getting involved. And he was really tearful, very, very upset. He was crying.
Mm.
And this clearly meant a lot to him, and I didn't get it, but it did. I think maybe he felt lonely or something.
Mm.
And then as we kind of finished, I said, listen, I'm going to go back to my friends now. You're going to go back home. Let's just forget this. And he very tearfully asked if he could have one more kiss. And I was like, oh no. Oh no. I was like, just a peck, just a quick peck. And then, you know, and then we never spoke again. But my friends obviously saw this whole thing emerge and saw me very reluctantly giving him a quick kiss. And
Wow.
afterwards they were like, how was that? And I thought, it was it's really gross.
Ew. So this didn't last long enough to affect your sense of self-worth at all.
No, it was do you know what? I think that maybe a lot of your listeners might relate to this, but I was the firstborn, you know, first sort of female child in my family, and I had done a lot of growing up young.
Mhm.
And in some ways, not always, but in some ways, there are a lot of adults I met who are older than me, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but they felt more useless than me. And you know, it didn't take long to kind of see them and be like, these people are not yet, they haven't realized they're adults yet, you know.
They're immature.
Yeah. So luckily, I mean, I was in a habit. Unfortunately, I can't sit here and say that I was perfect and I knew what I was doing from day one, because I got involved for a long time with lots of the wrong people, and so I wasn't perfect, but there was a certain level of mess I could see and be like, I'm not doing that. I'm just not doing that.
Okay. So you were pretty confident and had a good sense of self-worth at a young age?
Some and some. Yeah, some and
And
some. There were certain things I would see and be like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Okay. And so So help me understand. You were this lasted maybe 2 days after you found out.
Yeah, I think so.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's good. You dropped it. And so he was like, he said that he was 38, but he was really like what, 50?
His hair was all white and all grey, and he had a beard, and he wasn't bad looking. He was very
Yeah,
well dressed and stuff,
yeah.
but
That's funny. This guy, I don't know why. I think I could have been maybe 21 at the time or something. And he said that he was, I think he said he was 29. And I was like, you don't look like you're 29. I had took his wallet so I could see how old he was, and he was like 6 years old. But I found out later. I said he really doesn't look 29 because he would send me pictures, but he would take pictures of, like, how pictures look in like the 70s, and I'm like, why do these pictures look so old? It was so funny, but he was really like 60 years old.
wow.
Yeah, and it was funny. I was like, I can't believe I believed him. Like, but I knew something was. I was like, he don't look. But yeah. So anyway, we're because I realized that this didn't last that long. So I had some questions for you, but I don't think it would fit because you found out and were pretty disgusted. Seemed like it. You said you didn't want him to touch you.
Yeah. I was switched off at that point.
Yeah, at that point.
I do want to just make this really clear that I didn't have my stuff together. Like literally the next year, I dated a guy who, within maybe a month of us dating, he turned up to my house with a very glazed look and lied about it being anxiety meds. I was like, I've seen anxiety meds. This is not it. And he had a heroin problem. And I got involved with him for about 4 months, and it ended very, very badly. So I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, I never got involved with problematic people ever, because that's also not true.
I don't think I'm not saying that everything's perfect. I'm just saying with this particular situation, it went up and went down real. I've had that too. It went up and went down real quick. And so we're just going to go into the emotional and psychological effects of this. And so the question, what were the emotional highs and lows that you've experienced in the relationship? I think you kind of went over that, but you can explain a little bit more. And so did your non-binary identity, but you weren't non-binary. And that's why I said, when I created this, I thought that maybe at that time you did consider yourself non-binary, but you were just 20 years old, right? At this time.
Yeah.
But you can speak on that. You did say you felt, even as a little kid, like you didn't know who you were.
Yeah, gender-wise, definitely.
Gender-wise. And so even, I know you came out at 26, but before 26, you probably still felt weird. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
I hope that's not offensive.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was definitely a sense of being misplaced or something. Like it didn't. Yeah. But yeah, I think the emotional stuff, I was like, obviously being young, at that point, I hadn't really known many couples who I openly knew had dealt with infidelity. So I think having been involved in it without meaning to be, it wasn't even my intention. I checked what the situation was from the beginning, and obviously was lied to, or I think he was a bit delusional about the situation himself.
Yes.
So I think to have seen it up front, I mean, my friends laughed at me having witnessed the sort of ending of that situation. It was kind of funny. awkward and funny. But I think there was this sense of like, oh, like I've like even accidentally been involved in this, and it's a real thing, and this happens, and people do this to each other. There was like I wasn't massively innocent then. I mean, in terms of how I looked at the world, I was quite, I knew about different things that go on in the world, but I think to have accidentally been a part of something like that was kind of sad, I guess. I felt,
and that's a common theme. It's sad, but it's a common theme. Even doing these interviews, most people, even myself, I didn't know. And I was, it was a lot of deception. It was funny how you said, I guess he was disillusioned himself. It's so funny how, he wasn't disillusioned. They will tell you that, but they know what they're doing. If you're divorced or not. Come on now. If you went to the court, if you heard the judge declare you as divorced. So, that's why I said it's good that you didn't last that long in that, because when you found out early, so what would have happened had you not found out early? It could have probably been harder for you to get out, more difficult for you to get out. And so I don't even know if this would this next question would help, but what lessons have you learned about yourself as both, because you've experienced a lot of different relationships with women, correct, as well?
Yeah, I've had 2 serious ex-girlfriends. I've had a couple of non-binary people that I've dated, and some boyfriends as well.
Okay, got you. Okay, were they like non-binary but born a male?
Both, like either.
Oh. Okay. How do you even find people like that? Like, I don't even...
just dating apps. You can just set your preference to certain things and to find other like queer people. And
is that what queer means? It means non-binary?
It means anything. Like, so I might be more likely to date like a bisexual man, or other trans and non-binary people, or both of my ex-girlfriends were lesbians. So
okay, I got you. Okay, so looking back, do you think that your non-binary identity was fully understood or acknowledged in that relationship? And when I say that, I mean, even though that you didn't come out as that, right? Do you think that maybe he kind of suspected like there is something different about you that makes him click with you so much, that made him be so emotional when you tried to leave? Do you think it could have been your non-binary that he didn't even know about?
No, I actually felt like I was just, to him, just like an object that he could fantasize about. I didn't even really feel particularly seen by him. And obviously the first time he saw me was in an exotic club where I didn't have many clothes on. So I think that his fantasy about what we were and where our relationship was going had very little to do with me even seeing me in the most kind of like black and white, objective, like kind of way. To know what I look like in the nude from the get-go, I think would have really cemented this idea to him that I was a woman and that this was someone he could fantasize about and hope for more with.
Yeah, you weren't able to. You didn't get. He thought that you were be willing to be easy. It sounds like, to satisfy his fantasies, and then when he found out that you weren't going for it, even with his situation, because sometimes men, like, they can expose like how he felt. He felt like, even looking at it, he felt like he could say that about his wife in front of you and you would be okay with it. And I've looked at different interviews with people who dance in exotic, clubs, and people just think automatically that they'll put up with certain stuff that they won't. And so with this, I wanted to know, how long were you a dancer?
Only 5 months.
Oh, only 5 months.
I just thought it would be, at that point, I didn't know I was non-binary, and I always thought it would be funny to tell my grandkids that I used to do that and just watch them like throw up on my carpet.
Oh, wow. I got you.
Mhm. Yeah, so maybe there was a bit of that. I think when you dance, you have a stage name, like you're not even really you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I must have been a really easy person to completely disregard. We mostly just met up at bars and stuff. There wasn't too much of anything else.
Right.
But yeah, I think he had this idea that we were in love and that we were going to be together, and like it was just really far-fetched. And when he broke down when he was drunk, he was on all of those voicemails he left me that night, he kept saying things like, I know she cheated on me. He told me at the beginning that he had caught her in bed with his friend,
mm-hmm.
and that's what had caused the separation. And then once he was drunk and leaving me voicemails, he was saying, I know she did it, as if he was convincing himself and that he hadn't actually seen anything.
Yeah, that was a lot, and I'm glad we passed that one. But I know we were wrapping up on time because I know you have something else you have to do. I do want you to answer this last question. How do you feel that this relationship and your non-binary identity have influenced your view of commitment, honesty, and fidelity in relationships moving forward?
That relationship in particular, I think, left me with this really sad feeling that someone you have a life with, you don't talk to. I think that was like my main takeaway. I was like, wow, like you can be married to someone and have kids with them and not even be able to have a simple conversation of like, I'm feeling lonely, or I almost feel like we're not together anymore.
Right.
Or whatever we used to have isn't here. Like that's such a, when people usually get together and get married and start families and stuff, that all that stuff means so much.
Right.
And to reach a situation years down the line where it's all just been left to kind of go bad.
Yeah.
That's not a situation I ever want to be in. Even if I have this amazing communication with a partner and we reach a point 10 or 20 years down the road where we're no longer compatible, I would rather that we both knew that, rather than not knowing and for the end to be dishonest or it's hard to have those conversations. Sometimes it's the rawest you will ever feel, but I think that's better than not saying it.
Yeah. Right. And so did it shape, because at that time you didn't even look at yourself as non-binary, correct?
Yeah.
And did these, even the experience with the heroin addict, did these relationships help shape you to say, you know what, I'm non-binary, or I can't get with them and I can't get with the females so that I've been dating, so I don't want to be either. I just want to know, like, did your relationships affect your identity?
I think by the time I had dated enough troubled people, and my first girlfriend was definitely one of those troubled people. She was no angel, and I probably wasn't either. I think it just got to a point where I remember saying, during my second relationship with a woman, I said to my therapist, who I'd gone back to see, or had just started seeing, I said, I keep dating the same people. And she was like, it's just the luck of the draw. And I was like, no, it's not. And once I worked out the pattern that I was in, then everything changed. So it wasn't so much that my identity or the luck that I had or the pattern that I'd been in dissuaded me. I think if anything, it pushed me to be more inquisitive and to find out what was going on and to work it out and get better. And I did. So
Right. I mean, I can tell because you even said you don't date often in your homebody. So, I feel that completely. I know our time is very limited, like 1 minute limited. And I just appreciate you so much for sharing your testimony. We're going to have to dig. We're going to have to do this again. We're going to have to dig deeper. It's too much
I'll come back.
Yes. So you can exit or you can wait. But I just want to thank everyone for joining us this week with the other woman. It was very interesting, this twist. So you all make sure you tune in every other week for the other woman. So not this week, not next week, but the week after, another episode will air. Until next time, bye.